I heard the roar of the bulldozer before I saw it. My peaceful fishing morning shattered as I jumped from my dock, sprinting barefoot up the grassy incline toward my cabin. The treads of the massive yellow machine were already tearing into the north wall of my grandfather's hand-built lake house, a place I'd owned free and clear for 15 years. "Stop! What the hell are you doing?" I screamed, waving my arms frantically at the operator. The man in the cab looked uncertain, glancing between me and someone standing off to the side. I followed his gaze and felt my blood pressure spike. There she stood, Margot Kimball, the self-appointed queen of Pine Lake Estates, clipboard in hand and a smile that could curdle milk spreading across her face. Her highlighted bob haircut caught the morning sun as she strutted toward me in heels entirely inappropriate for lakeside terrain. "Mr. York," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I'm afraid this demolition is perfectly legal. You've failed to pay your homeowner association dues for the past 3 quarters. I stared at her, momentarily speechless with rage. "There's no HOA on this property, Margot. I've told you this a dozen times. My cabin predates your precious Pine Lake Estates by 40 years. The bulldozer operator had killed the engine, thankfully, but the damage was already severe. The entire northern wall was collapsed, exposing my living room to the elements. My grandfather's handmade bookshelves were splintered, family photos scattered across the debris." Margot tooted, flipping through papers on her clipboard. "Well, according to our records, this property was annexed into Pine Lake Estates last year. We sent numerous notices." "Notices to where? I never received anything." I was shouting now, aware of neighbors beginning to gather at the commotion. "This is my property. I've owned it since I got back from my second tour in Afghanistan. I'm Yates Landry. After 15 years with Army intelligence, I'd retired to start a small cybersecurity firm. This cabin, this sanctuary, was my reward for surviving 2 wars and countless missions I still couldn't talk about. My grandfather built it in the 1960s, and it had been my summer home throughout childhood. When he passed, he left it to me, knowing how much I treasured our fishing trips and quiet mornings on the dock. 3 years ago, the upscale Pine Lake Estates development had begun construction on previously undeveloped land about a half-mile north of my cabin. I'd watched with growing unease as massive homes sprouted around the lake, but my property had always been separate, a private holding with deeded lake access. Margot consulted her clipboard again. "Mr. Landry, we have documentation showing your property was legally incorporated into our association. The fees you owe total $4,750, plus late penalties." "Show me this documentation," I demanded, holding out my hand. She hesitated, then produced a folder from her oversized purse. I snatched it, quickly scanning the contents. There was indeed a document claiming to transfer my property into their jurisdiction, but something was very wrong. "This isn't my signature," I said, voice dangerously quiet. "This is forgery." Margot's face flickered with something, worry perhaps, before she recovered her composure. "Well, that's for the courts to decide. In the meantime, the demolition is approved by our board. Call off your bulldozer now," I said, pulling out my phone. "Or I'm calling the police." "The police?" She laughed, a tinkling sound that raised the hair on the back of my neck. "Mr. Landry, we have all the proper permits. Feel free to waste their time." I dialed anyway, watching her smug expression. "Hi, Naomi? It's Yates. I need help at the cabin. Now." "Yes, it's an emergency." Margot looked unimpressed until I added, "Bring Nick and Uncle Tom if they're available." I hung up and stared Margot down. "The bulldozer leaves now, or things get very complicated for you." "Are you threatening me?" she gasped, clutching her pearls in mock horror. "The board will hear about this." "No, Margot. I'm promising you consequences for destroying my property based on forged documents." I turned to the bulldozer operator. "Sir, I strongly suggest you leave now. This is about to become a crime scene." The man looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Lady, you said this was all legal." "It is," Margot insisted, but her voice had an edge of panic now. I pulled out my wallet and showed the operator my ID. His eyes widened slightly. I think I should go," he muttered, gathering his things from the cab. Margot stomped her foot. "You can't leave! We have a contract." "Ma'am, I'm not getting involved in whatever this is," he said, backing toward his truck. "You didn't mention anything about forged documents." As he drove away, Margot rounded on me. "You'll regret this, Mr. Landry. Pine Lake Estates doesn't tolerate noncompliance." I laughed without humor. "Lady, I've faced down warlords in Afghanistan. Your clipboard doesn't scare me." 20 minutes later, a caravan of 3 vehicles pulled up my long driveway. My sister Naomi stepped out first, her FBI windbreaker making Margot's eyes widen. Next came my cousin Nick from the Treasury Department, followed by my Uncle Tom, recently retired from his position as a federal judge. "What the hell happened to your cabin?" Naomi Saunders demanded, surveying the destruction with professional detachment. At 42, my younger sister had spent 15 years building a reputation as one of the Bureau's top fraud investigators. "Ms. Kimball here decided my cabin belonged to her HOA," I explained, gesturing to the increasingly pale woman. "Apparently, I signed documents I never saw, agreeing to join their association." Nick, always the quiet one, was already examining the papers I'd been given. "This is amateur hour," he muttered. "The signature doesn't even attempt to match Yates' handwriting." Uncle Tom, still imposing at 72, fixed Margot with the stare that had made guilty defendants confess on the spot for 3 decades. "Young lady, do you understand the severity of what's happened here?" Margot's composure was cracking. The board approved all of this. I'm just doing my job." "Your job includes forging documents and destroying private property?" Naomi asked, her tone deceptively conversational as she pulled out her notebook. "I didn't forge anything. Our lawyer handled all the paperwork," Margot protested. "And who would that be?" Nick asked. "Pierce Hamilton," she replied quickly, clearly hoping to shift blame. I noticed neighbors were gathering now, watching the scene unfold with undisguised interest. Several were recording on their phones. "Ms. Kimball," Naomi said formally, "I'd like to take your statement regarding the events leading up to today's demolition. Meanwhile, my colleagues will be securing what remains of this crime scene." "Crime scene?" Margot squeaked. "This is a misunderstanding. Destruction of property, forgery of official documents, fraud." Naomi counted off on her fingers. "Those aren't misunderstandings. Those are federal offenses." While Naomi led a sputtering Margot to her vehicle, Uncle Tom approached me. "How long has this HOA been harassing you?" "They started about 2 years ago," I explained. "Letters claiming I needed to mow more frequently, complaints about my boat being visible from the road. I always returned them with a note explaining I wasn't part of their association." Nick was already on his phone. "I'm calling Yasmin at the county recorder's office. We need to see when this supposed transfer was filed." Over the next hour, local police arrived, followed by more federal agents, friends of Naomi's from the regional office. It seemed my family reunion had turned into a multi-jurisdictional investigation. I stood by what remained of my cabin, torn between rage and a grim satisfaction that Margot's smug empire was about to crumble. By evening, the picture had become clearer. Pine Lake Estates, led by its board president Margot Kimball, had been systematically absorbing surrounding properties through a combination of intimidation, forgery, and creative record-keeping. My cabin wasn't the first they'd targeted, but it would be the last. "They've done this to 3 other properties around the lake," Naomi explained as we sat on my intact dock, beers in hand while investigators continued working behind us. "Elderly owners mostly, people who either gave in to the pressure or weren't around enough to fight back." "But why? The HOA fees can't be worth this much trouble," I said. "It's not about the fees." Nick joined us, accepting the beer I offered. "It's about the lakefront. Kimball's husband is a developer. Once they control all lakefront property, they can push through zoning changes. Turn this whole area into condos." I stared out at the peaceful lake, imagining it ringed with 5-story buildings instead of trees and cabins. "Over my dead body." "Won't come to that," Uncle Tom said, easing himself down beside us with a groan. His knees weren't what they used to be. "The county prosecutor is salivating over this case. Turns out Margot's been a thorn in everyone's side for years, but no one could prove anything concrete. Until she bulldozed the federal contractor's cabin," I finished, feeling a grim smile spread across my face. "While he had a house full of federal agents coming for a family reunion," Naomi added, clinking her bottle against mine. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, reconstruction, and community healing. Margot Kimball was charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and property destruction. Her husband, the developer Vernon Kimball, faced conspiracy charges when investigators discovered emails discussing their plan to acquire lakefront properties through the HOA. Pierce Hamilton, their lawyer, quickly turned state's evidence in exchange for leniency, providing documents showing the scheme had been in motion for nearly 3 years. Several board members also faced charges, though some were cleared after proving they'd been kept in the dark about the illegal activities. Most satisfying was the dissolution of the Pine Lake Estates HOA itself. A judge ordered all properties improperly annexed to be returned to their original status, and the remaining homeowners voted to replace the association with a simple neighborhood council that held no enforcement powers. My cabin reconstruction became something of a community event. Neighbors I'd barely known before, many of whom had also felt bullied by Margot's reign of terror, showed up with tools and supplies. Weekend work parties turned into impromptu cookouts, and by spring, my grandfather's cabin had been rebuilt, stronger than before. I was putting the finishing touches on the new dock when a silver-haired woman approached tentatively from the neighboring property. I recognized her as Nancy Whitfield, who lived on the lake even longer than my family. "It's looking wonderful, Yates," she said, admiring the fresh cedar planking. "Your grandfather would be proud." "Thanks, Nancy. Couldn't have done it without everyone pitching in." She nodded, then seemed to gather her courage. "I need to apologize. I knew what Margot was doing, not the forgery part, but the bullying. The constant citations and threats. I should have spoken up sooner." I straightened, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Why didn't you?" "Fear, mostly," she admitted. "After my Harold passed, I was alone here. When they started claiming my property had violations, threatening fines I couldn't afford. I just wanted to live in peace." I understood then why Margot's scheme had worked so well. Isolated homeowners, many elderly or only part-time residents, facing a seemingly official organization with lawyers and documentation. It was intimidating by design. "No need to apologize," I told her. "But maybe we can all look out for each other a bit better now." Nancy smiled, relief evident in her eyes. "That's why I'm here, actually. We're starting a lake association, not an HOA," she added quickly. "Just neighbors looking after neighbors. Making sure nothing like this happens again. Would you consider joining?" I thought about it for only a moment. "I'd be honored." The trial of Margot Kimball and her co-conspirators became something of a local sensation. I sat in the courtroom on the final day, watching as she stood for sentencing, her designer outfit replaced by more subdued attire, her highlighted hair showing dark roots. "The court has considered the severity of these offenses," the judge intoned. "The systematic targeting of properties, the forgery of documents, and most egregiously, the destruction of Mr. Landry's family home, all in pursuit of personal profit." Margot stared straight ahead, but I could see the slight trembling of her shoulders. "Mrs. Kimball, your actions have caused immeasurable harm to this community. You abused a position of trust to enrich yourself at the expense of your neighbors." The judge peered over his glasses. "I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison, with an additional 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution to all affected property owners, and you are permanently barred from serving in any homeowner association or similar community governance role." As the gavel fell, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about justice, and ensuring this couldn't happen to anyone else. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around our family. Naomi, as the lead FBI investigator, gave most of the official comments, but eventually, a microphone was thrust in my direction. "Mr. Landry, how does it feel to see this case concluded?" I thought for a moment. It's bittersweet. I lost a piece of my family history that can never truly be replaced. But I gained something too, a community. Before all this, I was just a quiet guy at the end of the lake. Now I know my neighbors. We look out for each other. "Any regrets about how it all unfolded?" another reporter asked. I couldn't help the slight smile that formed. "Just one. I wish I'd been there to see Margot's face when she realized she'd bulldozed the cabin of someone whose family reunion that weekend included half the federal law enforcement agencies in the state." Later that evening, I sat on my new dock, fishing rod in hand, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. Uncle Tom settled into the chair beside me, groaning as his knees protested. "Quite a year you've had," he observed, accepting the beer I passed him. "Understatement," I agreed. "But it's over now." "Is it?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "I hear you're running for that new Lake Association president position." I chuckled. "Someone has to make sure we never need another HOA around here." "Your grandfather would be proud," Uncle Tom said, raising his bottle. "He never did tolerate bullies." We clinked bottles and fell into comfortable silence, watching as fireflies began to twinkle along the shoreline. My cabin stood solid behind us, rebuilt but still holding the spirit of the original. In some ways, it was like me, damaged, reconstructed, but stronger for having weathered the storm. As darkness settled over Pine Lake, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Not just the absence of Margot's harassment, but something deeper. A connection to this place and its people that had been forged in adversity. Tomorrow, I'd help Nancy with her dock repairs. Next weekend, the whole lake community was gathering for our first official cookout. Life was moving forward. And if any future Margot Kimballs came around looking to throw their weight around our lakefront, well, they'd find a united community waiting for them. One that knew how to stand together against bullies, clipboard wielding or otherwise. I cast my line into the darkening water and smiled. Some lessons are expensive to learn, but this one had been worth it. No HOA would ever threaten our lake again, I'd make sure of that, one neighbor at a time.